Good morning, everybody. I am so excited to introduce Anita Bennett with Sunset Bay Candy. She is our workshop presenter today for the Business Resource Committee, and she is going to be talking about presentation tips and specifically public speaking and tips and tricks when this is not in your wheelhouse. And I have known Anita for a few years now, thanks to our Carlsbad Chamber of Commerce. And she is a phenomenal person, huge heart, so giving, and she makes the most delicious candy that I've ever had. And I know it's because of all that heart that she puts into it to help us make connections with other people. So today I am so pleased to have you speaking with us, Anita, and just sharing your journey and things that you've learned.
Thank you, Janie. Public speaking. Let me get to my slide deck here and get this on. And I want to make sure that it's working too, because there we go. All right. Public speaking tips and tricks when it's not in your wheelhouse, and it's definitely not in my wheelhouse. So I'm speaking from experience. How many of us wake up every morning and think, I love public speaking. I wish I could give a speech today. Probably not very many of us, because a lot of us don't like public speaking at all. In fact, there's a pretty famous study that's been done where they gave the participants a list of fears, of things that people are normally afraid of. The number one fear that came up was the fear of public speaking. And the number two fear was death. Now, I find that pretty hilarious on a couple of different levels, but it does illustrate that there are a lot of us that are very, very afraid of public speaking. For me, I just figured out recently that my tactic that I've used my whole life is used by millions of people. And that's the tactic of avoidance. I would avoid speaking in public to any size group, especially if I didn't know them. I'd avoid it at just about all costs until the 17-second commercial. I had to talk about my business, and I had to explain who we are. And so I practiced and practiced and practiced and practiced. And I'm kind of embarrassed to admit how much I practiced, because it was only a couple of sentences. And then I was in a meeting, and we were going around the meeting. Everybody was talking about their business. And as it got closer and closer and closer to me, I was getting more and more and more anxious and scared and pretty much borderline terrified until it got to me and I forgot what I was going to say for about a couple of seconds. I thought everyone could see how nervous and terrified I was, and that I had just completely messed it up. When in fact, I learned later that your audience doesn't really see all that. They might see a little bit of nerves or something like that, but they don't know how much you think that you've messed up, or how afraid or anxious you are. And that's tip number one. If you feel like you're nervous and you have to take a pause, just take that pause and keep going. Your audience doesn't see the extent, maybe just a few nerves. But for me, that's when I said, I have to do something about this. And I started my journey. You see, some people are born with a personality that kind of lends itself to public speaking and being a great public speaker. But in reality, public speaking is a skill. It's a learned skill, and anybody can become a great public speaker. Now, I've heard some of you speak, and I know there's a lot of great speakers in here. And so I'm hoping to take you on this journey, so far anyway, so that you may be able to just pick up a tip or a trick, or maybe it will remind you of something that you've forgotten. Because public speaking, those skills, they translate to any type of speaking, don't they? Whether you're leaving a voicemail, whether you're talking with family and friends in a business meeting. And I'm going to be talking about in-person public speaking mostly, but you'll see that some of those skills even translate to virtual and Zoom meetings. I'm first going to talk about 3 components of speaking publicly. That is, know yourself, know your message, and know your audience. And then we're going to talk a little bit about listening and then distractions. So let's get going. And stop moving. There we go. Know yourself. The very first thing you have to remember is to be authentic. Be authentic, be transparent. Because think about it. What you're trying to do is to give your message to your audience. And to do that, you need to build a connection with them, build a relationship with them, or they won't listen to you. And to do that, you must be authentic, because your audience is smart and they can see right through you if you're not being authentic. If I came out here and I pretended to be an expert on public speaking and I knew everything about it, you'd be able to see right through that. And if I came out and I tried to be some charismatic, high energy, well-known speaker, and I thought I loved their style and I wanted to be like that, that's not me. I need to be authentic, and you need to be authentic to build that relationship with your audience. Now, there are mechanics or skills that a speaker, an experienced speaker, will keep in mind. But remember, even though those skills they have like kind of guidelines or loose rules, that if you know those skills, you can manipulate them some to fit your style, because it's all subjective. Now, some of these I've listed right here, the main ones. Vocal variety. Vocal variety includes your pace, how fast you talk or how slow you talk. It includes your pitch, high and low. And it includes your projection, loud and soft. And you can move those 3 vocal variety parts around to add personality and add an emotion to your message so that people will listen to it and people will remember it. We've all known somebody, I know that we have, that speaks in a monotone and just speaks like this, and it's very boring. And if you're listening to a speaker with information that talks like that, you not only are tired of listening to that speaker, but you might miss some important parts of the message. So make sure that you use your vocal variety. Now, one of the other parts of vocal variety is the pause. And I put it separate because some speakers feel that the pause is the most important part of your speech. We all know that silence can be more powerful than words. And if you use your pauses strategically and with intention, you can add impact, drama, or you can even just allow your audience some time to think about what you said. And combined with the other parts of vocal variety, you can see how you're starting to add memorability and trust and emotion to your message. Now, gestures added to that, gestures are visual, aren't they? So they can be also very powerful, and you can combine them with the vocal variety, the pauses, the gestures. Just remember that your waist up is the power area. And if you're giving a speech in public or even virtually on Zoom, your hand should pretty much stay above your belt and up here. And do not put your hands, don't just put them straight to your side. That's boring. When it's boring, it's distracting and you're going to lose people. And never, never put your hands in your pocket or fold your arms, unless it's to add drama or it's just for a second for impact. A lot of people ask about, should I stand in one place? Should I be planted? Or should I move across the stage? Well, it doesn't matter if you're in a little space or a big stage. The expert speakers say, stay planted, say mostly planted, and then move with intention. Just as these other mechanics, you want to do them all with intention. And if you combine your moving with your gestures, with your vocal variety, that can be so impactful. They say, take a step to when you're changing a point, or move across the stage to another point and then stay planted. We've all seen people just stand in one place, and that's distracting. We've also seen people walking across the stage back and forth continuously. And I know they're trying to engage the audience that way, but that's distracting as well. Move to one place, stay planted, and then move to another. Maybe when you're changing your topic or when you're changing your focus, move to another area. There's all kinds of ways that people strategically move on a stage. All of these things put together, the visual pacing and gestures, along with the voice, vocal variety, and pauses, can really, really help your audience listen to you. Now, notes. Should you use notes? Should you not use notes? Some people think that if a speaker uses notes, that shows that they don't know everything about their topic, and it kind of reduces their credibility. Professional speakers say, use notes. There's nothing wrong with them. Just don't use scripted notes. And in fact, don't script your speech and practice it that way, because your audience will see that. You need to be authentic. And so your notes should be points. They should be just points to keep you along your path, just in case you kind of start to get off your path. They should be just a word or a phrase. Now, can you put your notes on a table or on a podium? Of course you can. Just set them right on the table where they're easy to see or access, or on a podium. But if you can, don't put that table or podium between you and your audience. The whole idea is to build a connection with the audience. And if you have something physical between you and your audience, it actually translates to less of a connection. Now, for me, I hold my notes. I usually fold a piece of paper and I hold my notes. And they're just the points, but I know we talked about being subjective with your mechanics. I know holding my notes is distracting. I know that my audience, when I'm using gestures, sees me moving my notes around, and it can be distracting, but still it's my choice. I'm still working on confidence, and when I have my notes, it's kind of like my security blanket. I've tried doing other things with my notes and I forget what I'm going to say. When I have my notes in my hand, I don't even need to use them. So that's just a confidence thing for me, but it's okay, because that's a decision that I made to help me with my confidence. Now, what about confidence and anxiety? Let's go back there. Confidence and anxiety. You have to realize everybody gets nervous before they're going to give a speech, before they're going to give a presentation. And it's just how you channel that energy that makes the difference. It was somebody who said, when it comes to public speaking, either you're afraid or you're a liar. And I just love that. So use your anxiety to your advantage if you can. And I've heard of people in the public eye that are on stage all the time. And I've heard them say, I get so nervous when I'm going to be giving a presentation, when I'm going to be out on stage, when I'm going to be singing or whatever they're going to be doing. They might even get physically sick. But then somehow they turn that energy around and they think of it as excitement. Walk out onto the stage with excitement, charisma, and great positive energy. If you can do that, that's a really great way to channel your anxiety and appear more confident. Your audience can't see that you might be anxious inside, right? The other thing is know your subject. I can speak from experience that if you don't know your subject, then there's all kinds of kinks and kind of like roadblocks in what you're saying. But if you know your subject and if you're passionate about it, things just kind of roll along and you're a lot more confident in what you're saying. Now, also there's techniques that speakers and actually anybody can use. There's so many, I Googled them, and there's hundreds of different techniques for relaxing and kind of just getting rid of some of that anxiety. A lot of professional speakers like to do mindful breathing. And that is when you breathe in, maybe through your nose to a count of 4, hold it, and then breathe out through your mouth. And when you breathe out, then you think of relaxing. Some people actually, when they breathe in, they visualize that breath and they visualize it capturing the anxiety. And then as you breathe it out through your mouth, then they visualize the anxiety actually going out with the breath. The cool thing about this technique and a lot of other ones actually is that you can do it anywhere. You can do this technique, even a shortened version, during a pause on stage, during your presentation, if you get that anxious. So that's a great one to know. What helped me was to realize, somebody told me anxiety is in the present. It's not in the past, it's not in the future. And the anxiety you feel before you go out on a stage or before you give a presentation, that anxiety is about yourself. It's about, is your hair okay? Will they think I'm stupid? Will the message get across? It's about all those things about yourself. When actually, you should be thinking about the audience. You should be thinking about helping the audience listen to you and getting your message to them. It should be about your message. So let's talk about a little bit about the message. First of all, know what your message is. Know the focus and the objective. Why are you giving this presentation? What do you expect the result will be? Or what do you expect to achieve from your presentation? A lot of speakers do what they call a mind map. And it's a little more than a chart or an organizational chart, but basically that's what it is. Put your theme, your introduction, your objective, and then work from there, the different points, and then your conclusion. Stick with and focus with your objective. Now, I just learned fairly recently about the 3 pillars to a speech. And actually, they can apply to just about any kind of correspondence and speaking. The 3 pillars, ethos, pathos, and logos. A lot of speakers say if these 3 components aren't in your speech, then your speech will fail on some level. Ethos is your credibility and your character, and it's convincing the audience that you know what you're talking about, that you're authentic and you're credible. Pathos is about your emotions and the emotional bond with your listeners. And we all know that the emotions are the motivators, right? And then logos is the rational argument. It's the evidence that supports what you're saying. Ethos, pathos, and logos, they don't all have to be in the same proportion in your speech, but they should all be there. And while we're talking about that and connecting with your audience, I want to make the point that professional speakers say, look at the audience. Don't just scan around and don't look up or down. Look at each person in your audience. If you're in a small group, just look over here at this person, make eye contact, and stay with them for a little bit to build that connection. Then go over here to this person, then back over here. If you're in a large room, then you need to go forward and back and forward and back and kind of around. You don't go from person to person, but make eye contact with your audience. And if you have an inadvertent pause, don't look up or down, look at your audience. Don't be weird about it. Don't be too long, but look at them so that they know that you're thinking about them and you're building that connection. You might wonder why I have a person on a bicycle for my picture. Well, that is to remind us to practice, practice, practice. The more you practice, the better your speech or presentation will be. And professional speakers practice while they're exercising. They practice whether they're riding a bike, running, lifting weights, whatever it is that they do, they practice when they're exercising, especially any difficult parts. They can work it out better. If you practice when you're exercising, it brings clarity. It's easier to work out the kinks and work out any of the difficult portions of your message. And also, they're thinking about breathing and breathing during a presentation. And it also helps work on that. So practice your presentation while you're exercising. But how do you start? How do you start your message? You know, I think really that years ago, the go-to was a joke because it seemed like everybody started their presentation with a joke. Now they say, do not start with a joke. What if that joke bombs? You want to start with something that's going to be engaging for your audience, but don't start with a joke. And you're not going to believe this, but just a couple of days ago, I was watching TED Talks, and out comes this speaker. He comes out, he's a pretty well-known speaker in his field. He walked out and he started his speech with a joke. And I'm not kidding, it was a low-key sarcastic joke, and I didn't get it. And I don't know if the audience got it because I didn't hear anything from them. And my mind went away from what he was saying to, was that a joke? Maybe it was, I'm not sure. And it took me a while to get back to what he was saying. It was very distracting. Do not start with a joke. But what they say is, and this might even be old information, is that you have 20 seconds. I'm not sure it's even that long to capture the attention of your audience. And then they say to have their attention for maybe 5 minutes, and then you have to recapture it. So there needs to be some variety in your speech. But the way that the professional speakers now are what they're using to start their message is with a story, something that is relevant to what they're saying. It can be funny or dramatic, depending on what your presentation is about. Or you can start with an example, something that's relative, or a question, or anything else that you can think of that will help your audience engage in a short amount of time. Now, what about that? What about your audience? We're looking at building a relationship. And to do that, First of all, you need to help your audience listen to you. Do whatever you can to help them listen and build a relationship. First of all, your speech should be relatable and understandable. Know who your audience is. I have a friend who runs a nonprofit. Her message is always the same. It's the same no matter who she talks to, but she focuses on a different part of it, depending on whether she's talking to her board of directors. Maybe they need more information, more statistics. She's talking to the community. Maybe they need something else. It's all the same, but she manipulates it to suit the audience that she's talking to. Very, very important. Know your audience and speak to them. If you don't, they won't listen. If they're expecting one thing and you're giving them another thing, they're not going to listen. The other important part is be concise, be brief. Just give the facts and the conclusion and move on. We've all known people that have given us a story. Personally, I know people that will start and give you a story and they give you every single little fact along the way. And you're thinking, oh my God, stop, just tell me what happened. And it's like that when you give too much information in your speech. Be concise. Speakers, professional speakers say that's the most dangerous part of giving a speech, is getting caught up in giving more and more and more information that your audience doesn't need. They don't understand it. Just get to the point and don't go down that rabbit hole. One of the things that you can see is probably my style is give stories and examples. That's a great way to help your audience connect and build a relationship. And stories and examples help, especially if the audience can relate to them, if they've experienced the same thing, it helps bring them back into your presentation. Confidence, clarity, and charisma is what professional speakers use to mix it up, to bring energy. And charisma, what they mean is energy and a force that you're bringing to the presentation to help your audience listen to you. So let's talk about listening. Remember that old commercial, "Can you hear me now?" I laugh every time I think about this because I do this all the time. Just yesterday, I was walking around my house with my phone to my ear. Can you hear me now? But just because people say they can hear you, does that mean they're really listening? With our minds whirling around at hyperspeed, way faster than somebody can speak, most of us are not very good listeners. And listening is the other side of speaking, isn't it? Speaking is not one-dimensional. It's between the speaker and the listener. And it's a two-way conversation. It's a two-way between you and your audience. Well, what if your audience isn't saying anything? What if your audience is one person with a blank expression and refuses to look at you? Is that person communicating? You bet they are, because nonverbal communication is very, very, very powerful. In fact, researchers have shown that 60 to 90% of our communication is nonverbal. And what that means is that you are communicating before you even say a word, 60 to 90%. And you'll be a more powerful speaker if you remember it's a two-way conversation. And if you do two things, first of all, listen to your audience. And second of all, I've said it many, many times, help your audience listen to you. How do you do that? What if you're on a big stage and there's an audience down there and they're not saying anything? How do you listen to your audience? Well, I say these folks, this audience is saying quite a bit. And some are engaged, some are not engaged. And I especially like this guy down here with the blue background because he's just kind of looking like, you've got to be kidding. Now, great speakers can manipulate their message. They can tweak it a little bit. They read their audience and see if they're engaged or not. If they're very engaged, they might even give them more information. They might expand on what they're saying. But if they're not engaged, they might do something, story, whatever, to bring their audience back to them. How else can you help your audience listen? Distractions. Distractions can derail a speech. If you can, move any distractions before you start speaking. There's always the distractions that come up while you're speaking. And a speaker needs to learn to either ignore those distractions or address them right away and get rid of them. I tell you, I have another story for you, but it happened a couple of weeks ago, and I know that it's happened to all of us. I'm sitting at an outdoor cafe with a friend of mine, and she is telling me this story, and she's using all the mechanics. She doesn't know it, but she is. She's looking at me straight in the eye. She's using gestures. She's got the vocal variety going, everything. And I was completely engaged until this little bee came up and started checking out our table. It was just flying around, not bothering anybody. And pretty soon my friend lost eye contact and she started following that little bee around the table. Then her body started moving. And then she lost her train of thought. She would start a sentence and couldn't finish it. And then she'd try to start again and couldn't finish her thought. That moment was completely lost until that bee went away. Then she could finish her story. But the connection wasn't there anymore. The engagement wasn't there anymore. And she lost the power of her story. And that is how powerful a distraction can be. Now, also be aware of the mechanics, because most of them, if you do it too much or not enough, that can be distracting. If you're pacing around everywhere on a stage, if your vocal variety is up and down and everywhere, that can be just as distracting as a monotone or just staying in one place the whole entire time. So find that sweet spot. Find what works for you that helps your message and does not distract from it. Some speakers sabotage their own speeches or messages. And one way that you can do that is by adding acronyms, buzzwords, and also industry-specific words. And if you do that, make sure that 100% of your audience uses those words every day. I was listening to a speech not long ago, a professional speaker, and she added an acronym. She used an acronym that I know, but I don't use it every day. And so my mind went, oh, what does that mean? Oh yeah, I remember what that means, but I can tell you because I was thinking about it later. My mind went on. It didn't go back to the speech. It was like, oh, that acronym, and then I remember this and da 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 da. And finally, I brought myself back to what she was saying. Very, very distracting. Also, give facts, and conclusions. Give your facts and always give your audience your conclusion, because if you don't give the conclusion, the same thing will happen. They'll get the facts and then they'll have to switch from listening to you to, oh, what is that speaker saying? Not only might they come up with a different conclusion, but you might lose them and you might not even get them back. Anyway, I've gone over quite a few things. And so these are the main points. Be authentic and build a relationship with your audience. Speaking skills apply to any audience and any size and any situation. speaking is two-way. So listen to your audience and help your audience listen to you. And remove any distractions that you possibly can. Now, there's lots of resources out there. If you want more information, you can Google anything and you'll get a plethora of information, enough to write a dissertation on vocal variety or any of those things. Also, what I did was I joined Toastmasters in Carlsbad. And we meet on Fridays at 12 o'clock for 1 hour. If you're interested in that, just get with me and I'll give you more information. Also, there's 2 books that I'd like to tell you about. The first one, Knockout Presentations. It is like the Bible of presentations. If you speak regularly, get that book if you don't have it already. Diane DiResta has all kinds of resources on YouTube. She has podcasts, she has Clubhouse, and I really suggest you get in touch with her or check her out if you need more information on this. And then Cues is about nonverbal cues. Vanessa Van Edwards wrote this book fairly recently, and 60 to 90% nonverbal cues, very, very important. So thank you for letting me give this speech, this presentation. It was a lot of fun for me, and I hope that you got something from it. I'm going to stop screen sharing, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions?
I just want to say, wow. Wow, that was really awesome, Anita. Just
thank you.
That was great.
Thank you.
It was great. And I don't have a question, Anita, but I actually want to be vulnerable and talk about a big mistake I made in my first time I ever presented here at the Chamber, which was a 2-minute soapbox presentation, which I spent weeks writing and preparing for. And I stood up there, and Don Sando, I asked him afterwards, what do you think? And he said, you just stood up there and read it. So what I've learned about myself, which I think is really important that people know, is that for me, I work a little bit differently. I've been podcasting a very long time. So as long as I've done the work and I put it to bed and I have some bullet points, I think the next time that I just speak from me, like you said, being authentic and from the heart. But yeah, what are you launching another career here, Anita?
That's a great story, John, because what I realized was that we all get nervous. We all it's not easy for anybody. And I thought it was just me, but it isn't. It's everybody. And that, I don't know, somehow I guess that helps.
Yeah.
Any other questions, Don?
It's not a question, just a comment. I really like the way you had those quotes at the bottom, but you didn't read them. Because like you said, our eyes are much faster than anybody can speak. And so, and the quotes were they were great quotes too. So
thank you.
I
found those quotes and I wanted to share them. And really, it was a decision because I knew putting them on the bottom of those slides would be distracting, that you'd be reading those quotes while I was talking and your minds might go somewhere else and not follow what I was saying. But that was a decision I made because I thought they were great too. And so thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, I agree. I just wanted to tag on to what everyone said. It was such a very authentic, well thought out presentation with so many great tips, Anita. So thank you so much. Like I was taking notes and have so many good takeaways. So I really love your presentation. It was so good. And I'm so glad it was recorded because I think that this could even be beneficial for not just, within our chamber, but anybody in the community. So I'm sure it'll come up when people search. So thank you so much for all the great info. Anybody else have anything?
I thought it was great. I saw so many of the mistakes that I've made speaking that were brought out, and you know, it's one of those things, right? The more you do it, obviously, the more comfortable you get, but you never are not nervous. And I think that I would have never guessed by listening to you today that that was ever a major anxiety that you had, because you did fantastic and
Thank you.
great content. And I'm really glad we recorded it to share.
Thank you. That
We
means
need
a
to
lot.
do- So thank you so much.
Yep.
And I, yes, round of applause.